Ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide enough, baby. I just got this sick new, I don't even know what to call it. It's like foam pads that wrap around my microphone, which makes me feel like I'm a professional in a recording booth. And I don't know if you guys can tell the quality difference, but it is I think, direct reflection of the amount I spent, which is $60 on Amazon. Okay, welcome, one and all in one, to the podcast that could change your life. And it could also keep you running in place like a hamster on a wheel. I don't know what this podcast is going to do for you, but I'm going to keep talking. So welcome back to the podcast that's all about making small, impactful changes to your daily routine to feel better. Today's topic is accept that it's an epic quest to find happiness, especially today. So, a quest. I think we're all familiar with video games and movies and books that are epic quests, right? And a lot of people, I think, are very much drawn to that type of tale of conquering over some challenge, some evil, fulfilling a quest, whether it's a personal quest or some quest to save Middle-earth, if you're Frodo. And Samwise, of course. We cannot forget about Samwise. I use this word quest, and it's a word that implies a lot. It's a quest to find happiness in today's world because of all of the distractions that are out there. From the moment you wake up, your phone starts blasting you with notifications. You open your phone, it's blasting you with ads, just trying to grab your attention and fragment it into pieces. You're seeing advertisements on billboards if you are going to work. You're just getting this onslaught of things thrown at you, people wanting you to be a certain way, people wanting you to sound a certain way, people wanting you to wear certain things, and it's exhausting. And it's this, I think, culmination of where, and I don't want to get too deep here, but I think it's a reflection of the values that capitalism has instilled in us. And I speak for the U.S., for the United States, because that's where I've lived my whole life. It's a reflection of those values of growth, just continued growth, continued consumerism, and just trying to continually grab attention to fuel more growth and purchasing more things. And it's just escalated to where now we find ourselves in a very unique time, a time of great achievement, and a time where it's really hard to discern what is good amidst the noise. What are things that are actually good amidst all this noise? And so that is where I go back to that word, quest. And I threw in the adjective epic quest because I think it's an epic quest to find happiness today. If you approach it like it's a quest, if you approach it like a video game and reframe the way that you try to integrate these activities into your life, these activities that are intended to help you improve your bodily health, your mental health. If you reframe it as like a fun little game, almost like, and I always think of one of the first games that really sucked me into its world, and that was Star Fox on Nintendo 64. I remember the day that I came home. And my mother, while I was gone, I think at school, had gone out and done the most amazing thing for a child, which was purchase a Nintendo 64 system. And then she set it in the living room right next to the TV. And it was just there when I got home. And the Star Fox cartridge was already in the Nintendo 64. And I still remember the feeling walking through the door, and I just felt pure elation when I saw that video game system sitting there. And I saw Star Fox, the cartridge, inside of the system. And it was like this weird sense that anything is possible that I felt when I saw that video game system. It's crazy how freaking plastic and circuits can trigger that kind of reaction in a child, but it does. And it did in me that day. And so I just remember I pulled up Star Fox and I started playing, and it's structured in levels. So you have to beat each level to progress to the next one. There's varying degrees of difficulty, but ultimately each level is its own mini quest, and you're trying to defeat enemies along the way. And then at the end of each level, you have to defeat one boss, and each boss has a specific weakness, and you have to employ a specific strategy to defeat that boss. And I don't remember all of the specifics of the game, but the one thing I do remember is that at the very beginning of the game, Peppy kept popping up on my screen and telling me to do a barrel roll. Do a barrel roll. And so I would double R trigger, you barrel roll, and then you would avoid enemy fire. And that has nothing to do with the moral of this episode, but, f***ing Peppy. Okay, so where am I going with this, you ask yourself? So I think this comparison to Star Fox, to video games, and this nature of the video game and our life, they're both quests. And we have bosses in our game of life, and we have enemies along the way at different levels, along different stages of our life. If we think about our day-to-day in that context, I think things become more lighthearted and fun, because whenever you're in the game mindset, things just feel less heavy. They feel less momentous. The consequences don't feel as dire because it's a game. And then B, you can kind of approach things in a stepwise fashion to where you understand that you're always going to have to face more bosses, and you're always going to have to face more enemies, and you're always going to have to make decisions about what you do and the strategies you employ. And sometimes those strategies don't work out. But just like a video game, you can always play the level again. It's the same in life. Even if you don't beat the boss the first time in your 20s, in your early 20s, if you don't beat whatever boss is trying to defeat you right now, maybe it's a body image thing, maybe it's an anxiety thing, maybe it's just FOMO, maybe you just have FOMO, that's your boss. Even if FOMO or anxiety or body image issues defeat you the first time, the second time, the third time, every single time you fight that boss, you get knowledge about that boss's weakness. And in Star Fox, normally the bosses literally just had a vulnerable point that you would shoot your ship's laser beams at. And there is a point of vulnerability of those things that are your bosses that you're trying to defeat. And those points of vulnerability are more subtle. They're not as obvious. And they're within yourself. You have to find them. That's the difficult part. How do you find those spots within your own psyche that are the trigger point for defeating these bosses that are causing you anguish. How do you do that? Well, you start, and this is going off what we talked about the last 2 episodes, but you start with why. You find your why. Why do you want to change? Then you start experimenting. Experiment with new things. You try new things out. And when you go through the process of experimentation over time, you'll start to uncover those vulnerabilities, because you're going to shoot, if you're fighting the tank boss in the desert, and I remember this level in Star Fox, you're going to have to shoot all over that tank before you figure out where the vulnerable spot is. You're not going to find it the first time, most likely. It's the same when you're finding your own internal vulnerabilities, or I guess this is kind of a double negative, but like it's a vulnerability within your negativity. And if your negativity is metaphorically this boss you're fighting, you're going to find it if you experiment. And if I give an example to take this general talk into something specific, if I give an example like FOMO, you are afraid of not achieving the same things as your peers. Maybe you're just afraid of not going to Coachella or some other music festival, because those are fun. And when people post pictures of those events and you didn't go, it feels bad because they look like they're having fun. It's colorful. It's full of people. When that keeps happening over and over, and you see those pictures and you feel bad, you can find the weak spot. And it starts, I'm going to go back to my first episode again, it starts with asking why. And this time you're not putting a why forth. It's not why do I want to do something. You're asking, why am I feeling this way? Why, when I see these pictures of my friends at Coachella with hennas on their foreheads, and you're thinking, why is the one time a year you put a henna on your body at Coachella, and why are you choosing to put it on your forehead? Why when you see this, do you feel that mental trigger or anguish? And maybe it's because you see those other people going there and they look happy to you. Maybe it's because as a kid, you didn't get to do cool things, like do the things that were in fashion or in style. Maybe you couldn't afford it. Maybe your family didn't have the money, whether it was like having kids over for big birthday parties with those blow up, I don't even know what they're called. They're not trampolines. They're like they're bounce houses. And I mean, don't get me wrong, those are sick. But if you didn't have a bounce house growing up, that was not sick at all. So the reason that when you pull up that Coachella photo, you feel bad, it could be some childhood experience. It could be just some wanting to be seen a certain way by other people. And you kind of have to keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And I think this is a theme that we'll continue to dive into during this podcast. But you need to start peeling back the layers of your own bosses and finding that spot that you have to shoot at. And I think when you get to the spot and you see where you need to target your laser beams, then you can slowly start shooting at it, and eventually you'll defeat the boss. And for me, I had FOMO for sure. And in a weird way, the only way to defeat the boss was to get right next to the boss. And that's not something you do as a first instinct. But a lot of bosses, you have to go right up next to them, like in the eye of the storm, exactly where you wouldn't think to go. And by that, I mean, I just had to go do those things for myself and realize that, like, even when I was there, I went to EDC in Las Vegas and Chicago. Like, I was really into electronic music festivals in my early 20s, and I just kept looking for that feeling of feeling like present and happy and alive, and it just wasn't happening for me. It wasn't happening. I would go, and it was overwhelming. There was a lot of people. I'm kind of an introvert. I realized this much later in life. It wasn't until I went to a ton of these shows, and over like 4 or 5 years, the result was the same every time, and it clicked. I was like, this isn't something that is enjoyable for me. Therefore, I don't need it in my life to be happy. And when other people post about it, that doesn't need to affect my happiness. So sometimes you do need to just do things for yourself many times and realize that they're not making you happy to be okay letting them go from your life. And there's nothing wrong with that. There is no shame in that at all. That I want everyone to know that, because I think people get hung up on feeling guilty for going through phases in their life. And you shouldn't. You shouldn't, because you cannot grow, you cannot progress through the levels of life unless you go through the phases, and unless you do what it takes to beat the boss. I don't know. I sincerely feel bad for the people who are going through that anguish right now and trying to defeat those bosses. Like, it's not fun. Even if you look okay from the outside, it's not fun on the inside. I get it. And this podcast isn't going to solve your problems overnight. But if you take away one thing, just one thing, I just want you to reframe these problems and struggles you're having right now into the context of a game, of a video game with levels and bosses, and even come up with like characters for these bosses. Like literally think of some alter ego personality for the boss, and imagine yourself, like literally visualize yourself in the Star Fox ship, and Pepe's barking at you at the top of his lungs to do a barrel roll. You're barrel rolling like your life depends on it. Picture yourself barrel rolling in that ship with that boss in front of you. And the 3 examples I used earlier: body image, FOMO, constipation. Imagine yourself with that boss in front of you, and the boss could be like a giant, just tire with eyes and cars for feet and arms. So like this weird conundrum of a boss where you're like, well, it's a tire, but why are his feet cars and his arms cars? And why are the cars disproportionately small to the rest of his body? And where's his heart, by the way? Because he's a tire and there's a hole where his heart should be. And that's a whole separate issue. So imagine yourself in the Star Fox ship, and you're just firing away at this tire, trying to defeat the tire. And then the light bulb clicks, and you realize that you have to shoot in the one spot you never thought to shoot. And that is in the middle of the tire, where there's nothing at all. Got me? All right, good. And then you finish the video game, and that's the reward in itself, is you beat the game. And I think that's the same approach you should take in life, is that beating the game and beating the boss is the reward in itself. So thank you guys for listening today. Stay tuned in if this is relevant for you, this is entertaining, useful. And yeah, follow me on Instagram and Facebook at Antenna Method. And for those who want to dive into trying the method out, I would say to try what I've called a 14-day channel clear. Basically just like a 14-day little mental, bodily cleanse of sorts. And you can find that at antennamethod.com. Have a good day.